Hey, good morning. How are you? Guess what? This is the last promise, I promise. The eighth and the very last lecture in History 2303. With this, the end of this very short tape, we will wrap up the fourth testing period and get everybody ready to take the final exam. When we were talking last time, we acknowledged that Bill Clemens was once again reelected in 1982, largely because teachers unions turned their back on Governor Mark White, who, as governor, advocated for, set up a committee to study the conditions of Texas schools, and that committee recommended complex change in the law, House Bill 72, that did all kinds of things, committed Texas to no pass, no play rule, provided for pay raises for teachers, but also, very controversial, called for teacher competency testing, that teachers had to pass a test to prove that they were competent enough to be teaching our children. And that was something that teachers unions, or at least teacher groups throughout the state of Texas, were offended by that relative to Mark White. And in 1982, Bill Clemens was reelected as governor of Texas. After 4 years as governor, a conservative governor once again, Bill Clemens declined to run, and in 1990, Democratic State Treasurer Ann Richards declared for the governorship of Texas. She won the Democratic nod for governor, and Ann Richards faced West Texas agribusiness millionaire Clayton Williams for the Texas governorship. Richards' very solid record as state treasurer, coupled with Clayton Williams' lack of political expertise and his mouth, very candidly, helped to destroy Clayton Williams in this campaign, and it led to the election of Ann Richards as governor of Texas. Now, what do I mean by his mouth helped destroy him? Well, Clayton Williams invited a bunch of news and television, radio personalities out to his ranch, where he watched a bunch of cowboys branding cattle, and in the context of his comments about cattle, Clayton Williams said something very disparaging that many women found disparaging in the state of Texas. He made a public comment. He said, the weather in Texas is really iffy. You just can't really do too much about it. It's sort of like rape. When a woman is raped, you can't do anything about the weather, so you just might as well, just accept it. And women's groups throughout Texas were stunned that a politician seeking the governorship of Texas could be so callous about the subject of rape that that a woman who is being physically assaulted, apparently, just like we can't do anything about the daily weather, couldn't do anything about it, so she might as well just lie back and, quote, enjoy it. And that was not an appropriate thing for anyone running for public office to say, and it was a great faux pas, and it began to sink Clayton Williams. But later in the campaign, Ann Richards was crossing Texas, as was Clayton Williams, campaigning, and they happened to cross paths in the Houston Intercontinental Airport. Richards was flying in, and Clayton Williams was flying out, and apparently they wound up at the same gate with Ann Richards coming off the plane and Clayton Williams standing there waiting to board, and she saw him, and she walked over and to shake his hand, and he refused to shake Ann Richards' hand. In Texas, a man doesn't do that to a woman. even if he's stupid enough to make comments about rape and compare rape to the weather, you don't refuse to shake a lady's hand. And if his prior comment, inappropriate language, didn't sink him, the fact that Clayton Williams refused to shake Ann Richards' hand caused virtually every woman's group in Texas to say, there is no way in Hades that we're going to vote for Clayton Williams. And Ann Richards was elected as governor of Texas in 1990. She served as governor of Texas for 4 years, and she gained a great deal of public notoriety during those 4 years as governor of Texas. In fact, at the National Democratic Convention in 1992, presidential election 90, is that right? Have to think that through. 2000, 1996, 1992. In the election of 1992, George Herbert Walker Bush, was running as a Republican nominee for President of the United States. And at the Democratic National Convention, Ann Richards gained just incredible notoriety by giving the keynote address at the Democratic National Convention. That was the address in which she lampooned George Herbert Walker Bush by saying, "Poor George Bush, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth," acknowledging that he was born into a very affluent family of Prescott Webb, senator from Connecticut, and that George was sort of born on third base in the sense of playing the game of baseball and the game of life. And she lampooned George Herbert Walker Bush, and that helped to defeat, help President William Jefferson Clinton defeat George Bush in 1994. That's what it was. No, 1992. In 1994, after helping defeat George Herbert Walker Bush, when her 4 years term in office in Texas was up, Ann Richards sought re-election in 1994. But the Republicans in Texas in 1994 nominated a Texas alderman and Texas Ranger minority owner George W. Bush, son of George Herbert Walker Bush, to be the nominee of the Texas Republican Party for the governorship. And George W. Bush won and defeated Ann Richards. And that was the last race that Ann Richards would engage in. Soon after she left the governorship, I believe she developed breast cancer, and Ann Richards passed away. George W. Bush was a conservative governor, very conservative, and at the end of his 4 years in office, he stunned his advisors by acknowledging that he was going to seek the presidency of the United States of America. And as a matter of record, George W. Bush came to Kerrville, Texas, to start his run for the Republican nomination for the presidency of the United States, and in Dietert Auditorium gave in 1996 at the opening of his campaign. For the very first time, George W. Bush gave his compassionate conservatism speech, a speech that he essentially, in my opinion, since I was at Dietert Auditorium and listened to the governor that deliver that speech that day in early 1996, he butchered that speech. He did a terrible job. And as I sat in Dietert Auditorium, I thought to myself, this guy couldn't be elected dog catcher. And what do I know? In fact, George W. Bush repeated that conservative, that compassionate conservatism speech over and over and over, and he got pretty darn good at it. And by the end of the campaign, he had won the presidency of the United States. That was the day that, just to hedge my bets, when Governor Bush came to Kerrville, there are something like 2,000 initialized pavers in downtown Kerrville. And you can buy, even today you can still buy initialized pavers to honor parents, loved ones, yourself, children, etc. And I decided that, geez, this guy might very well wind up becoming President of the United States. So I purchased a $30 paver that says Governor George W. Bush, and I asked the governor through the Secret Service if he would find the time to come down to downtown Kerrville, and he very graciously came down, had his picture taken with me and Mindy Wendeley, the Main Street director. And when that event was finished, I called the city of Kerrville. I was on the city council at the time, and I asked the city manager to do me a personal favor. All of those pavers in downtown Kerrville, there's not one of them that is cemented into the pavement, except for the brick that I bought for then Governor, soon to be future President of the United States, George W. Bush. I acknowledged to Glenn Brown, the city manager, that just in case the guy did wind up being president, that if there was ever going to be a paver brick stolen, it was going to be that brick. And so, of all the paver bricks in downtown Kerrville, there is but one that is permanently cemented into the sidewalk, and that is the paver that's down on Water Street near Pampel's, just this side of it, that says Governor George Bush, George W. Bush. But George Bush turned out to be a pretty doggone conservative governor and a conservative president of the United States, and the war on terror with the attack at the Trade Center in New York certainly changed the perspectives of his administration. When George W. Bush left Texas, his place as governor of Texas was taken up by Rick Perry, the former ag commissioner, I believe. And Rick Perry served as governor for about 8 years, and about 3 to 4 years ago sought the Republican nomination for the presidency of the United States. And Rick Perry is famous for his mental lapse during one of the presidential debates. Rick Perry said, if I become president of the United States, there are going to be 3 agencies that I do away with. And Perry said, the Internal Revenue, and then he began to balk, and he finally said, shoot, I can't remember those 3 things. And the other candidates said, wasn't it this and wasn't it that, and sort of helped out Rick Perry. But that mental lapse helped to cause Rick Perry, Republicans, to turn away from Rick Perry. After Rick Perry, the last governor and the current governor is Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott, who is the first physically crippled, confined to a wheelchair governor in the history of Texas. Greg Abbott is a very conservative individual who was the former the Attorney General of Texas, and so Greg Abbott's administration is going to be one that continues to be conservative. Well, relative to the future of Texas politics and the history of Texas, what does the future hold? My friends, if I were a prognosticator and I knew exactly what the future of Texas would be, I'd still be in politics. And I wasn't a very good politician, I have to admit that. But the reality is no one knows for certain what the future of Texas is. But we know this: there will be continuous population increases that will change the ethnicity of our state, and place enormous cultural and economic strains on Texas in the future. The truth is that Texas is part of the area of the country that is going to have a Hispanic wave sweep over it, i.e. that a majority of Texans in the future will be of traditional minorities, and the traditional long-standing majority of Anglos will wind up being in the minority. And that, of course, is troubling to many Anglos. It represents great opportunities for the traditional minorities taking over, blacks, Hispanics, women in the state of Texas, but it will put socioeconomic stress on Texas as the population grows. We know that Texas will suffer continuing suffering through disparity of wealth, given the increasing number of poor, children, elderly, and people particularly living in the Rio Grande Valley, which is the most poverty-prone area of Texas. The truth of the matter is, as in American society, there is a growing disparity of wealth. The rich get richer, and the poor become poorer and more numerous, and that is continuing in the state of Texas. The economy of Texas has to continue to be diversified. The day is over when oil is the sole source of revenue for the state of Texas. We've got to diversify our economy. We've got to support agriculture to continue to have enough food for Texans and the rest of the country and the world to have food supplies. We need to diversify and develop into high tech and bring businesses to Texas, industrial businesses to Texas. We know in the future that Texas will continue to be most probably a one-party dominated state, dominated today by the Republican Party. There is not a single statewide elected official in the entire bureaucracy of the state of Texas that is today of the Democratic Party. They're all Republicans. Up to the time of John Tower, every single member of the state bureaucracy of Texas was Democrat. And just as a one-party controlled state by the Democrats was not good, a one-party controlled state of Texas controlled by the Republican Party is just as bad. We need a viable alternative. If it's conservative versus liberal, if it's Republican versus Democrat, if it's Anglo versus Hispanic groups, we need a viable two-party political system in Texas. And one-party dominance is not good. It wasn't good when the Republicans were in the minority. It's not good today when the Republicans are in the majority. There will be, we can be sure, ever-increasing urbanization of the state, causing increased urban glut and a resulting decline in rural standards. More and more money will have to be spent on roads and sewage and water and energy sources for urban areas, and that means less and less for the rural areas of Texas. We also will have continuing problems with our criminal justice system and the size and the scope of the Texas prison system. You know, back in the 1990s, in the case of Ruiz, the ruling of Ruiz versus the state of Texas, the courts in Texas said that prison systems were overcrowded, and the courts ruled that there should be one bed for every person incarcerated in Texas prisons. And if they didn't have enough beds for Texas prisoners, the state of Texas, would have to build new prisons or furlough and pardon and parole hardened criminals. And we still have an overglut in the criminal justice system, and many minorities say that the criminal justice system is stacked against minorities, and it has been traditionally stacked against minorities. Another thing is assured in the state of Texas. In New Mexico, near Albuquerque, there is a group, and that group has the following as its motto: La vida es la agua es la vida. Life is water, water is life. In fact, shortages of water will continue to plague Texas. And we know that by the amount of water that not being retained in our lakes. The lake levels are falling in Texas. God knows that Texas is the second largest consumer of water of any state of the nation, California being first. And you know that just this semester, just about 3 weeks ago, Governor Jerry Brown of California called for mandatory 25% conservation of water by every single Californian. And California is beginning to pass laws that restrict the watering of, if you use water to clean off your sidewalk, that's a waste of water. If your toilets are running improperly, that's a waste of water. It's against the law. And Texas is going to have to fess up and realize that we have a shortage of water. The water in the Guadalupe River is 125% subscribed. Every drop of water, and even water that isn't in the river, has been subscribed by the state of Texas to various communities and agencies, say in the Guadalupe, as far as the Guadalupe River is concerned, beginning from its headwaters through Kerrville usage all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. There are communities that tap the water of the Guadalupe River. What's going to happen, my friends, when the aquifer in San Antonio runs dry and 1 million people wake up one morning and turn their water faucets on or flush their commodes and not have any water pressure because the aquifer has declined to the point that there isn't any water? Is the state of Texas going to allow 1 million people in San Antonio to simply go without any water? Water's life. They'll die. And many people say that those who have water need to protect their water. And indeed, that's one of the reasons back when I was on the Kerrville City Council, there was a proposal that was made by the county of Bexar and the city of San Antonio, reached out to Kerr County and said, in the future, join us in a political coalition and we'll share available water sources with you. And I oppose that. I oppose that vigorously, as did one of the county commissioners of Kerr County, Jonathan Letts, because when two dogs are presented with a bowl of food, which dog eats first? It's the big dog. And the big dog eats as much as he wants, and he eats it all if he chooses. And if he chooses not to eat it all, when he quits eating, the little dog has a chance to eat. And in the case of Kerrville versus the huge population of Bexar, I knew who the dog was going to be, the little dog was going to be. It was going to be Kerr County. And so I recommended that the counties contiguous surrounding San Antonio form Region J, a water district that looks to the needs of counties adjacent to San Antonio, and I refuse to get into a political arrangement with San Antonio because I believe that in the future water politics will be the key to Texas politics. When water becomes extremely short of supply, water politics will be the singular most important issue in the state of Texas as far as I am concerned. And finally, there's one other thing that you can be sure of in the future of the state of Texas: taxes, taxes, and more taxes. Texas must find alternative sources of revenue to counter ever-increasing expenditures of state government. In truth, my friends, we don't have a business tax, a corporate tax in Texas. We don't have a personal income tax, and there are 6 or 7 different taxing sources that could be used to provide additional revenues to the state of Texas. If Texas selected those alternative taxing sources and taxed just at the national level of the 50 American states, we would find billions and billions of additional dollars. But the reality is that people of Texas don't want to have a personal state income tax, and we don't want business taxes on corporate taxes on businesses in Texas, because we think that any corporate tax might force corporations to go somewhere else and to evacuate the state. And so we're reluctant to pass the tax laws that will provide additional revenues. But my friends, the simple truth of the matter is that in virtually every southern state where a sales tax has reached up to 5%, people in that southern state have said, hey, we don't like paying state sales tax. We want to find an alternative source of income. And invariably, those southern states turn to a personal income tax, a small 2% personal income tax, and then drop the sales tax back down to about 2 or 3%. But then over time, slowly but surely raised their sales taxes and personal income taxes. So the reality is, as long as the state of Texas continues to expend money, we will need revenues to match those expenditures, because the state of Texas and the conservatives who run the state of Texas today are committed to a balanced budget. And that means $1 in for every dollar out. And so as our dollars out increase, we're going to need increasing dollars in, and that will only come through taxation. I'm afraid that Ben Franklin was right. There are a couple of things in life that are assured: death, each one of us eventually, and the payment of taxes. But in Texas, I always jokingly say there's a third thing. There will not be, within the context of your life, a constitutional convention to change the 1876 Constitution. Because if we couldn't do it after the Sharpstown affair, when the state was mortified by the behavior of Frank Sharp and politicians sympathetic to Sharp during the Sharpstown scandal, then day-to-day political affairs being what they are, I doubt very seriously, in fact I can guarantee that in the context of your life there won't be an attempt to change our 1876 Constitution. But with that, my friends, we have reached the end of our road. I want to thank you for allowing me to go on camera. It's been an interesting affair to tape these lectures, and I hope that I can use these lectures in future History 2303 classes. And for now, I'm going to sign off one last time. I'll see you around campus, and I'll see you in the clouds. Thank you for this opportunity to tape 2303 History.